When we talk about what a plant needs to thrive, we all know the big three, right? Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. But what if I told you there's another crucial element that's been hiding in plain sight for decades? Pretty much just written off as, well, dirt. But now a wave of new research, especially right here in India, is showing that this overlooked element is actually a powerful bodyguard for our crops. It's a key to building resilience in a world that's getting tougher and tougher for farmers. That element? It's silicon.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we're going to dig into a silent crisis that's happening right under our feet in India's soil. Then, we'll decode the science of silicon. How do plants actually use this stuff? After that, we'll see its bodyguard superpowers in action and look at the hard proof coming from Indian farms. And then, we'll get practical, talking about how to take this from the lab to the land. We'll wrap it all up by looking at what this really means for the future of farming.
So let's start with the big picture here. The challenge that Indian agriculture is facing isn't just about what we're adding to the soil, but what we've been taking away without even realizing it. And this really leads us to the central question we've got to ask ourselves. Our modern intensive farming practices, especially with some of our biggest crops, are systematically stripping a natural protective element right out of the soil. This process has a name. It's called desilication, and it's leaving our crops exposed and vulnerable. It's like we're slowly dismantling their built-in defense system.
And this number really puts the scale of the problem into perspective. 230 to 470 kilograms per hectare. That is a staggering amount of silicon that a single high-yielding rice crop can literally suck out of the soil. Think about that. That's like removing 5 to 10 bags of fertilizer, but it's an element we almost never put back. We religiously replenish N, P, and K, right? But this massive silicon withdrawal just gets ignored, and that's creating the very crisis of desilication that Indian researchers are now sounding the alarm about. Okay, let's switch gears and get into the core science, because to really understand why that soil deficit is such a massive deal, we need to get crystal clear on what silicon really is for a plant, and maybe more importantly, how a plant can even use it.
Now here's the fascinating part. Technically, silicon isn't essential in the same way nitrogen is. See, a plant can grow without it if it's in a perfect lab with absolutely zero stress. But out here in the real world, it's considered quasi-essential. And what that means is, when stress hits, we're talking drought, pests, disease, its absence causes major problems. And here's the real catch. Plants can only drink it in one very specific form, as monosilicic acid, which has to be dissolved in the soil's water. And this chart is the key to understanding why crops like rice and sugarcane are at the heart of this soil crisis. They're what we call high accumulators. They are incredibly thirsty for silicon. It can make up over 1% of their total dry weight. Other cereals are somewhere in the middle, while crops like pulses and legumes, well, they have a much smaller appetite. This difference explains exactly why growing rice or sugarcane year after year can so quickly bankrupt a soil of its available silicon.
So once it gets inside the plant, how does silicon actually do its job as a bodyguard? Well, this is where it gets really smart. It's not just one thing. It's a sophisticated two-pronged defense strategy. It protects the crop from the outside in and from the inside out. Just think of it like the bodyguard's toolkit. On one hand, it builds a physical armor, a really tough mechanical barrier. And on the other hand, it activates an internal alarm system, a biochemical alert that gets the plant's own defenses fired up and ready to fight. Let's break down how each of these actually works.
Okay, the armor is all about pure physical strength. That monosilicic acid we talked about gets transported up into the plant's cells, and there it polymerizes and hardens into amorphous silica. You can basically think of it as a type of biological glass. This creates what's called a cuticle silica double layer that physically reinforces the plant's skin, which, by the way, also helps cut down on water loss. It makes the cell walls thicker and more rigid, which is exactly why it's so good at preventing rice from lodging, falling over. And for pests like stem borers, the plant actually becomes abrasive. It literally wears down their mouth parts and makes it just too much work to take a bite. But silicon isn't just some passive shield. The soluble form floating around inside the plant also acts as a signal that flips the switch on the plant's internal alarm system. So when a fungus or bacteria attacks, a silicon-fed plant can unleash a rapid flood of defense enzymes. It essentially primes the whole immune system. There's a technical term for it, systemic acquired resistance, making the plant's response way faster and stronger. And during abiotic stress, like heat or high salt in the soil, it revs up antioxidant activity, protecting the plant cells from damage from the inside.
Now, this all sounds fantastic in theory, right? An armor and an alarm system, but does it actually work out in the real world? The science is incredible, but what really truly matters are the results from the field. So let's look at the hard evidence from Indian agricultural research. For cereals, those high accumulators we talked about, the proof is pretty much overwhelming. In rice trials down in South India, applying calcium silicate boosted yields by up to 38%. That's huge. The data consistently shows silicon significantly reduces the severity of leaf and neck blast, which can be a devastating disease. And against insects, it's proven to lower the incidence of the dreaded yellow stem borer. For sugarcane, it's a well-known tool in the toolbox to stop lodging and cut down on borer damage. The results speak for themselves. Okay, now check this out. The results for pulses and oilseeds, in some ways, they are even more dramatic. In Karnataka, a simple foliar spray of silicic acid on soybean plants increased pod yield by up to 79%. 79%. I mean, that is a real game changer. For black gram, it's been shown to reduce damage from those pesky sucking pests. And here's an incredible bonus benefit. In mustard, silicon actually helps the plant block the uptake of toxic heavy metals like cadmium from the soil. So it's not just protecting the plant, it's actively making our food safer.
And this is where we really see silicon's power in building climate resilience. Just look at this data on abiotic stress, the kind of stress that farmers are facing more and more every single year. Under drought conditions, silicon's been shown to preserve yields by 11 to 18%. That's yield you would have otherwise lost. In salty soils, it helps plants block toxic sodium. It can even raise a crop's heat tolerance all the way up to 41 degrees Celsius. And, like we just saw, it reduces heavy metals in the final grain. This isn't just another nutrient. This is a multi-purpose stress shield.
Okay, so the science is solid, and the results from the field are incredibly compelling. That brings us to the next big question, right? How do you actually use this stuff on the farm? Let's get practical, because choosing the right form of silicon for the job is absolutely critical to getting these results.
In India, you can basically group the available sources into 4 main types. At the very top, in terms of bioavailability, you've got stabilized orthosilicic acid, or OSA. It's a liquid, it's immediately ready for the plant to use, which makes it absolutely perfect for foliar sprays or drip irrigation, as a rapid rescue for a crop that's already under stress. Then you have soluble silicates, like potassium silicate. Then come the traditional workhorses, minerals and slags, like calcium silicate. These are slow release, you apply them to the soil before planting, and they're great for building up the soil's silicon bank for those thirsty crops like rice and sugarcane. And finally, you have rice husk ash, a fantastic, sustainable, circular economy option.
So the decision-making process is actually pretty logical. First, what's your crop? Is it a thirsty accumulator like rice or a light feeder like a pulse? Second, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Are you dealing with an immediate pest attack right now, or are you trying to build your soil's foundation for the long haul? Third, how are you going to apply it? Foliar, drip, soil, and finally, you just match the source to the job. A fast-acting foliar OSA for a soybean that's facing a sudden heat wave is a completely different strategy than using a slow-release calcium silicate for a rice paddy at the start of the season. And the Indian market is clearly evolving to reflect this new understanding. We're seeing a definite trend away from just the bulk minerals and a big shift toward more advanced, highly bioavailable products like OSA and even nanofertilizers. And maybe the biggest signal of all, this isn't some fringe idea anymore. The government of India has officially included silicon fertilizer in the Fertilizer Control Order. That gives it full regulatory backing and really clears the path for wider, standardized use across the country. So, after all of that, where does this leave us? Let's bring everything together and take a quick look at what this all means for the future of Indian agriculture.
So let's just boil it down to the essentials. The evidence is clear. 1. Silicon is proven to boost yields and resistance in our most important staple crops, rice and sugarcane. 2. It triggers a powerful biochemical defense system in pulses and oilseeds. 3. Its bodyguard role against things like drought, heat, and salinity is absolutely essential for building climate-resilient farms. And maybe, most importantly, 4. Success hinges on using the right tool for the right job. Silicon is no longer just a nice-to-have, it is a need-of-the-hour nutrient. Which really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. As the climate pressures continue to intensify, as our resources become more and more precious, and as the challenges to our food security keep growing, the question isn't whether silicone is helpful. The real question is overlooking this bodyguard nutrient a risk we can truly afford to take?